Very good evening, Sunday the 3rd of September 2023. Thank you to all of you for joining me. I've had a couple of weeks off. I think hopefully some of you have had a summer off as well. I know I've got some internet problems, so if it buffers, that's at my end, and I'm afraid there's nothing I can do about it. I've had to switch internet provider. My deal with the old internet company came to an end, and I needed a deal with a new internet company because the prices went up. So I've switched provider, and it's the first time I'm using it. So I'm sure it'll settle down as we get through the evening. But if it starts to buffer, that's why it's buffering, and I'm afraid it's beyond my means to do anything about it. So hopefully we'll be okay, and as the weeks go on, it will get better, or I'll figure out what I've done wrong at my end. Okay, so we've had a few weeks off. Let's get started. Operation Sherwood made its first arrest. Okay, Operation Sherwood is what Greater Manchester Police were forced to launch following confirmation that between the police, the council, the authorities had failed children, and they'd covered up for the grooming gangs. They'd failed to investigate in Oldham as they'd failed everywhere else. And the Burnham's investigation was forced to admit that, and there was 11 cases. They came up with 11 cases, actually, many, many more children, young people in our town who were groomed and gang raped, and they kept the news secret. And to this day, they refuse to confirm how many. But this is Operation Sherwood. It was launched, and it's now been, I think, 14 months or so. Now, not long after they launched Operation Sherwood, Greater Manchester Police published a misleading headline about raiding people's houses and whatnot last year. And of course, after the headlines, they didn't make reference to Operation Sherwood. People believed it was Operation Sherwood, but as this statement released a couple of days ago proves, it wasn't Operation Sherwood. So they waited 14 months to arrest anyone. And I don't know what's happened. Those of you asked me, I don't know what happened to those they arrested last time. No one's been charged. Otherwise, it would have been front page of the newspaper. So if they had been charged, you would have known about it. So it's just PR. PR nonsense from a police force exposed. So this was the press release. Operation Sherwood makes first arrest. Let me just move this in front of me so I can see it, and move the keyboard to one side. And earlier today, following warrants at his home and business address, a 52-year-old man was arrested on suspicion of rape, sexual activity with a child, trafficking and grooming. So this is one of the ringleaders. This is clearly one of the ringleaders. I've knocked that out, haven't I? This is clearly one of the ringleaders, because they've been arrested with, suspicion, innocence until proven. But this is one of the suspected ringleaders because all the boxes are ticked: rape tick, sexual activity with a child tick, trafficking tick, and grooming tick. He remains in police custody for questioning. 31st of October. Today is the 3rd. I've heard nothing since. If they've charged him, they should have charged him by now, I think, and a press release would have followed. But I've seen no press release from Greater Manchester Police that has followed since then. Operation Sherwood, according to these people, is looking, there you go, into 11 cases which were studied and referenced by the independent team. Of course, the team wasn't independent. And more significantly, the 11 cases, the first one of the victims, Child A, Operation Sherwood visited and threatened for sharing her story. The other 10 cases, we have no idea what happened, how often were, none of that. They've kept all of that hidden, and they've done it on purpose. They've done it on purpose. Now, the senior investigating officer, Detective Inspector Jenny Zaborowski of Greater Manchester Police's Child Sex Exploitation Major Investigation Team said, "We are really pleased to have made this arrest." How can you be pleased to make an arrest? Have you charged him? Has anyone been convicted? No. How far does this go back? He won't say. How many children did he? No, there's nothing. It's assurance that our investigation is very much active and progressing towards justice for victims and survivors. Since when was an arrest a demonstration of progressing towards justice for victims and survivors? Clearly, when the bar is set very low, I would suggest, Detective Inspector. We understand from the outside looking in, it has taken us some time to get to this stage. This stage being make one solitary arrest. However, we have been moving forward steadily, at a speed and in a manner which is right for the victims and survivors. Every survivor and every victim I've spoken to have wanted haste, and these people finally being brought to justice. So I'm not sure how waiting 14 months is at a speed in a manner which is right for the victims and survivors. Which is right for the victims and the survivors. I don't think so. And I don't think Detective Inspector Jenny Zebrowski would be able to quantify or evidence a single victim who believes it is. Apparently, the victims and survivors are at the heart of Operation Sherwood, which is probably why so many victims and survivors have come forward and have said they have no faith in Greater Manchester Police or Operation Sherwood, which is an police operation implemented by the very same police force that not only failed these children and young people, but helped cover up what had happened to them. For what, a decade? 2 decades? We still have a long journey ahead of us, but learning from other non-recent CSE investigations, we are committed to taking a progressive, victim-centred, suspect-focused, bullshit bingo evidence-based approach, which gives us and our partners the best chance of securing positive judicial outcomes against offenders. What absolute gobbledygook nonsense. And so we know it was gobbledygook nonsense. This was the headline in the council-funded, the partners, police's partners, and the council's partners, the Manchester Evening News. This time by someone called Ashley Blakely, live and breaking news reporter. Man arrested for rape after police storm his home and businesses in Oldham child sexual exploitation probe. You'll see they've used the word storm, as though they've raided his home, they've stormed his home. And the story is the same as the press release, okay? But they've used the word storm. Well, there's nothing to suggest them, but there's a reason why they've used the word storm. There's a reason why they've used the word storm is to manipulate members of the public into thinking that Greater Manchester Police are on it and are taking decisive action. Clearly not. They're not taking decisive action of any kind whatsoever. But what I find interesting is where the Manchester Evening News are reporting it. Remember this lot. Remember Tortoise Media, who went on a campaign to attack and harass me and other members of the public last year. They had a slow newscast. And they had this man, Sean Fielding, who, by the way, is now a councillor in Bolton. And in his publicity as a councillor in Bolton, he admits that he was actually council leader in Oldham. And what this Tortoise Media, involving a woman known, what was her name? Something Cummings was her name. Well, she's not for coming forward to Oldham now that the police have been forced to admit they've arrested someone as a consequence of the 11 cases that have been identified only because of the campaign led by me, supported by you. Basia Cummings. Nowhere to be seen now is our Basia Cummings. Let me play something.
listeners will know Rochdale also has a high proportion of South Asian residents. And I think when I speak to some people in Oldham, you get the impression that they almost assume there's a similar Rochdale-style street grooming problem.
Just give me one moment.
There sort of has to be. It's like, well, it happened in Rochdale, and it happened in Rotherham, and it happened in Telford, and it happened in Oxford, and those places.
I'll get this fixed. It was working before.
Listeners will know Rochdale is not very far from Oldham. Rochdale also has a high proportion of South Asian residents. And I think when I speak to some people in Oldham, you get the impression that they almost assume there's a similar Rochdale-style street grooming problem because there sort of has to be. It's like, well, it happened in Rochdale, and it happened in Rotherham, and it happened in Telford, and it happened in Oxford, and those places have big South Asian communities, so it sort of has to be happening here.
But that's prejudice, isn't it?
It's total prejudice. It's nonsense. But Rajamir realises that people think that. He realises that he can tap into something quite rich and something quite deep, which is this feeling that we're going to be next.
Now, of course, it is possible that his interest in grooming cases came from his time working in charities and his apparent focus on sexual grooming with his charity Rise.
You should go and find that clip from Tortoise Media. Basia Cummings from the Mill, the posh voice of Joshi Herman, relentlessly attacked me. Tortoise Media is a global news organisation. So when I get angry at what's took place and how I've been demonised, there you go. Apparently it was total prejudice. It was total prejudice that children were groomed and gang raped in a similar, if not identical, fashion as to what happened in Rochdale. Well, now we know it was not prejudice. It was just true. Just true. So this is what I want to bring up with you next. This is a story from The Guardian. It's not new. You can see it's The Observer, Rochdale sex grooming gang. I was groomed at 14, then the courts came for my children. Her evidence helped put abusers behind bars, yet Amber was vilified by the authorities and says her torment will never end. So much for you can't say it did not destroy lives. Amanda Chadderton, this woman, is saying her torment did not end. Between 2008 and 2010, a child abuse ring that came to be known as part of the grooming gang phenomenon operated in Rochdale. Girls aged between 13 and 15 were trafficked, prostituted, raped and assaulted by the gang. One victim was forced to have sex with at least 20 men in one night. Another was forced to drink vodka and was vomiting over the side of the bed. It's a familiar story. I don't want to belittle it. I just wanted to bring this up. And Amber, of course, is one of the fictitious names in the Free Girls documentary that forced Andy Burnham to launch his bogus investigations. Bogus, I say bogus, in the sense that they're very, very restricted and do not have the powers that a public inquiry would have. What he should have done is gone for a public inquiry, but he didn't do. Now, what I want to focus on, and I know some more men were charged recently in Rochdale, I think. What I want to focus on is this victim was forced to have sex with at least 20 men in one night. So what I want to know is from the authorities, Greater Manchester Police, Oldham Council, Rochdale Council, how many total offenders were there? It's easy going after the groomers. It's easy going after those who trafficked them. I call them the cartels, those who belong to heroin dealing gangs. It's easy going after those criminals. But how many men were lining up outside hotel rooms, waiting outside takeaways, waiting to take their turn and paying money to rape little children? What I genuinely do want to know is how many of these men there were. Because if there was 21 in one night, and remember Shabir Daddy Ahmed ran his, well, I'll let you decide if he ran his operation out of the Pakistani community centre where he was employed by the council and seconded to. How many of these men were there? And more significantly, what I would like to get an understanding of is how many of these men have been charged and convicted, not members of the grooming gangs, but their customers. Can you understand the differentiation? Not members of the grooming gangs, as in the ones who groomed and, these children and lured them in. Not the ones who trafficked them, but the customer base. How many customers were there? And how many customers have been convicted? Because I don't want it to stop just with arresting the groomers. I don't want it to stop with just arresting and charging those who traffic them. I want those who actually raped them and paid, because they surely knew they were raping children. Now, I can't, and I've looked, I can't find anywhere where the customers, there's been a targeted police intervention operation in identifying who the customers were. Why? Is it because they're in the thousands? Is it because they're in the tens of thousands? If 1,000, 1,500, 2,000 girls in Rotherham, at least, and those are the official records, yeah? There's a figure, isn't there? There's an astronomical figure in Rotherham. They won't give us the figure in Oldham, but there's an astronomical figure in Rotherham. And if these girls were raped by 20 men a night over decades, how many men were involved? We know in Manchester there were 96 members of a grooming gang. Well, if there were 96 members of a grooming gang, how many customers did they have? How far does this go? And why won't they investigate it? And this is, again, why we need a public inquiry. It's because they are too scared. My position is that they are too scared to follow the evidence. They were too scared to follow the evidence, which is why then, when Detective Inspector Jenny Zaborowski of Greater Manchester Police's Child Sexual Exploitation Major Investigations Team says we still have a long journey ahead, I would very much welcome her to accept that the long journey includes following the evidence trail all the way to those who were queuing up outside the kebab shops, outside the takeaways, where these girls had already been groomed, already been, I don't know what the right word is, prepped. You understand what I mean? Softened up, drugged up. The black book, 8 o'clock. This man's name, 8:15, that man's name. 9 o'clock, venue 2. 10 o'clock, venue 3. All of that needs to be put together. And only then is justice anywhere near coming to be done. So, what am I saying to you? I'm saying to you, I have no faith in Operation Sherwood. I'm saying to you, there's not a single police operation anywhere in the country, never mind Greater Manchester Police, that has followed this through in the way it should do. And I'm saying to you that there are still, what? I don't want to alarm you. I can pick a number out of the air. If Amber was raped by 10 men, 20 men a night, and there's 11 cases in Oldham, and I know there's more because I spoke to victims who aren't in the 11. Well, how many rapists are there in Oldham? How many child rapists are there in Oldham who are walking around free? So that's my position on that. Very good evening to those of you who are joining me late. Hiya Lynn, hiya Sally, Julie. My internet connection is saying excellent now, so hopefully it'll have settled down and the stream should be okay. Move on. So Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission came in and did an inspection, I think back end of May, into the special education needs provision. It's an area SEND full inspection. Now, when they came in, my information is Gerard Jones, who's the director in charge of children's services who oversees this, sent an email around saying, oh, the area SEND are in, Ofsted are in, hopefully we'll be okay. Or words to that effect. Now, I'm struggling to see how someone on £120,000 and more a year can be so blasé over an inspection and use the words, hopefully we'll be okay. Well, we weren't okay, were we? And this is what Ofsted had to find. Ofsted found. Inspection outcome. There are widespread and or systematic failings leading to significant concerns about the experiences and outcomes of children and young people with special educational needs or disabilities, which the local area partnership must address urgently. Ofsted came in, and contrary to Gerard Jones's belief that everything hopefully would be okay, what they found was widespread and systematic failings leading to significant concerns. Arud Shah, the leader of Oldham Council, who, from what I can gather, is busy out, hanging out on the fringes of the local authority on this Tour de Oldham or whatever this cycling has gone through, has not had a comment to make on this. Although I have seen her help launch some Chinese takeaway come chicken shop on Union Street or Yorkshire Street last week. But on this issue, nothing. And the Oldham Times, of course, only went and reported on it after I had put the information out there last week. It's only after I'd shared the information that the Oldham Times went and reported on it. And instead of reporting on it where they get a quote from SHAH, the leader of the council, because what's come out is outrageous, or even perhaps Gerard Jones, who's the chief, the council officer responsible, or even the cabinet member, the councillor responsible with that portfolio, who, by the way, is McMAHON Ali. And previous to McMAHON Ali, last year it was Shahid Mushtaq, who's now the deputy leader. They weren't nowhere near any of those, but they did do this interesting, I found it interesting, article about opposition councillors react to damning Oldham SEND report. Opposition councillors have reacted to a damning report into services for children with special educational needs and disabilities in Oldham that has uncovered widespread failings. Inverted commas. Widespread and/or systematic failings. The word systematic is important, but they've omitted it. Councillors say parents are at their wits' end. Ofsted and the Care Quality Commission published a report on Tuesday following an inspection in June. They go and speak to Liberal Democrat councillor Helen Bishop. Why they speak to her, I have no idea. Who represents Saddleworth South, says she has spoken to parents who are battling to get support for their children and feel constantly fobbed off. She said, I have spoken to many parents who are at their wits' end and feel as though they face a relentless battle to get the support they know their child needs. They feel constantly fobbed off and some slip through the net altogether, having become totally frustrated with the system. I think what she says is some parents give up, I think is what she means by that. One such parent, so that was Helen. One such parent is Jade Hughes, the Royton Independent spokesperson on education and child welfare, and I'll get to that in a second. Sorry, I'm just... who says she had to fight to get support for her children. She said, I am disgusted at how Oldham Council are failing children with additional needs. As a single parent of 3 children with additional needs, I had to fight for support for all my children. My children are going to be lost to mainstream education if I had not fought for the help and support they require and need to be successful in mainstream school. Okay, so she speaks from a position of experience, and she's speaking in a capacity as not just a parent, but the spokesperson for the Royton Independence, Education and Child Welfare. And that's Jade. Councillor Bishop, they return to Councillor Bishop, has said children with SEND should be equipped by the local authority to fulfil their academic potential rather than offered an education that is little more than a tick box exercise. I find myself agreeing with Councillor Bishop. But this is where the Lib Dems do what the Lib Dems do best, which is prop up the Labour Party. She added, the council needs to produce a swift response to the report with a clear commitment to working meaningfully with children, their parents and carers and education professionals to improve the situation, blah, 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 blah. We cannot allow a culture of failure to take root. Well, I'm afraid, Helen, a culture of failure has already taken root if you'd read any of the reports. Here is the Ofsted report. Let's have a look at the report that goes back to the local area SEND inspection in 2017. That's the last time. I'm not picking on them. You can, or 2019. Yeah, 2017. Have a look at that. Main findings. The implementation of the SEN reforms have been slow and fragmented. Leaders have not approached the implementation as a joint partnership between education, health and social care. That goes back to 2017. That's 6 years ago. Leaders have no mechanisms to check the quality of documentation. Performance information is not accurately evaluated. Leaders do not have an accurate view of strengths and weaknesses. Leaders do not demonstrate the capacity to implement future plans. The education, health and care process in Oldham is fundamentally flawed, does not comply with the code of practice, and there is possible illegal practice. The quality of EHC plans is unacceptable. The children and young people who have SEND in Oldham do not make strong academic progress. Oldham is one of the worst achieving areas nationally for educational achievement for this group of children. How long, Helen Bishop, before it takes root? That's from 2017, lifted directly from Ofsted's webpage. It took me 2 seconds. So what is this nonsense you're talking about? We cannot allow a culture of failure to take root. Clearly, a culture of failure has already taken root. A culture of failure has already taken root. Royton North Councillor Lewis Quigg has called for Councillor McMAHON Halley, Cabinet Member for Education and Skills at Oldham Council, to issue a statement explaining why SEND children are being failed. The Conservative councillor said there is clearly a lack of leadership and direction which has allowed this to happen, and it is time for those in charge to take responsibility. This service has been failing for years and it is time for accountability. What he said was he wanted people sacked. He wanted people resigning, forced out. And that person at the top of that is Gerard Jones, £120,000 plus. If this was the private sector, now I know many of you who listen in on me work in the private sector. If this was the private sector, Gerard Jones, an urgent board meeting would have been convened and he would have resigned by the end of the day. He would have been marched out. Not so in Oldham. Councillor McMAHON Halley, who's the cabinet member responsible, would have issued an immediate statement. No statement from McMAHON Halley. No statement from SHAH. They've misquoted Councillor Quigg, or selectively quoted Councillor Quigg, because he has asked for resignations. The Oldham Times didn't have the... Well, I'll let you decide why they left that bit out. I also find interesting that Jade Hughes, the spokesperson for child welfare from the Royton Independents, is featured here. And I'm not getting at Jade. I know they're very prickly at the Royton Independents. I'll get to that in a minute. But you can see the headline here. Opposition councillors react to damning Oldham SEND support. Jade isn't an opposition councillor. And you need to understand what is also going on here. What is also going on here, last time, my last transmission I did with you, do you remember I talked about the Royton Independents were looking to stand in Royton North? Now, I know some of you went and spoke to, or tried speaking to Councillor Hurley. Councillor Hurley wouldn't respond. I know you tried speaking to John Hughes and John Hughes blocked you or responded. I know Jeanette's here, who listens to this, and she was clear that wasn't the case. Now, listen. The only reason Jade's there, and Jade doesn't know this, is that the Oldham Times are also mischief making here and trying to promote someone who they think might be standing against Councillor Quigg in Royton North. Now, I don't think that's going to happen anymore, but as a last time. But it's very simple, isn't it? Why have the Royton Independents not issued a statement confirming that they will not be contesting Royton North? And put all of this to bed. They haven't. And they won't. And they did ban me or block me from their Facebook page. And then unblock me from their Facebook page. Which is the sort of habit I would expect from Oldham Council. And not an opposition that we helped get elected. It's exactly that, isn't it? Where is the response from the independent opposition councillor? Okay, let's carry on. This is a story from June. It's relevant because I wanted to, first of all, set the scene. Failsworth Pub approved to be transformed into a 17-bed HMO. Now, I know this did not go down well in Failsworth. You can see the Oldham Times report claiming you're using the word underutilised. Sally, before I carry on, I completely agree with you. I completely agree with you. Oldham Council won't even issue a statement confirming how many children have been failed, are on the waiting list, or have tried to access SEND provision. There is just no data. They won't share the data. SHAH is too busy wearing his sunglasses, swanning around the town, or opening chicken shops. Mohan Ali clearly hasn't been given a script to read out because he's incapable of issuing a statement off his own back. And Gerard Jones is probably on his summer holidays, if I'm honest with you. I think he'll probably be on his summer holidays. An underutilised pub, I don't know how a pub is underutilised, will be transformed into a 17-bedroom HMO. The Bay, or the Bay Horse, which sits on Wrigley Head in Failsworth End Terrace, became a 17-bed HMO. All 17 residents will have a shared kitchen and dining area, living room and 2 utility rooms. Toilets and bathrooms will be shared on 2 floors. You can see it doesn't read well. 2 showers, 2 toilets and 2 sinks between 17 people. 17 strangers possibly. A total of 13 objections were made. Far too many HMO residences in Failsworth, referring to similar homes in Pole Lane and Ashton Road West. Limited people were notified of the planning application. What about GP services? All of those, yeah, we agree with. What about parking? Noise issues. A neighbour expressed concern for their young children and feared a spike in drug issues, litter and traffic. Drive down prices in the area. Another objector found the plans to be draconian, stating that the plans favour the greed of the developer and not for the benefit of its occupants. And I think whoever that objector was, I think they succinctly put how I feel about this. It's the greed of the developer and not enough, and it's not for the benefit of the occupants. This is about generating profit rather than providing essential services. I'm sure you can do both. I'm sure you can generate profit and also provide essential services, but I do not believe 2 toilets to be in any way enough for 17 people. Thank you, Nick. We agree on that, yeah? But the council supported it in its approval of the plans on Monday, June the 5th. So this was in Brian Hobin's backyard. My understanding is Brian and his FIP lot objected to it. So, hold my drink, forget 17, I'll give you 18. Oldham plans for 18-bedroom HMO, narrowly approved, and this was in Waterhead. Now, Councillor Brian Hobin is on the planning committee. And this is in Clarksfield, opposite the Bilal Mosque. I know many Muslims, members of the Muslim community, the Pakistani community, were campaigning against this. Again, it was operated as a pub. The original proposal looked to have 23 bedrooms. However, amended plans brought the number down to 18. Aren't you lucky? And bedroom on a floor after bedroom on a floor after bedroom on floor. Ros Birch addressed concerns. Interesting, I want you to follow this. Ross Birch speaks out against HMOs. Fly tipping, antisocial behaviour. She described as deprived, cramped and overdeveloped area, saying a new HMO would only exasperate these problems. Councillor Peter Dean, another Labour councillor, shared these concerns. Would change the wild character, I don't know what that means, of Clarksville. I think that's a typo. He added that the HMO would cause a lot of community tensions. When put to a vote, 6 members of the committee present at the meeting, Shoaib Akhtar, Maxud Van Garth Arkness, Hazel Gloucester, Ruji Sultan, Naila Ibrahim, voted in favour of approving the application. There were 5 who voted against it: Lancaster, Nadeem Iqbal, Peter Davis, Paul Fryer and Josh Charters. Well, Councillor Brian Hobin abstained. Now, why did Brian Hobin abstain? Thank you, Lynn. Whole character. Okay. Why did Brian Hobin abstain? If I was a betting man, I would say he abstained because the Labour councillors in Waterhead were happy to vote through the one in Failsworth. This is petty childishness from across all sections of our councillors. Agreed? I think so. I think it's pettiness. Move on to Coldust. Oldham Estate to have 6-bed HMO despite objection. Now look at this. There's a photograph. That is a house, isn't it? We agree. That is a house on a residential estate. Plans for a 6-bed house in multiple occupations on a residential estate in Oldham have been given the go-ahead despite dozens of neighbours objecting to the proposals. On Penwell Fold in the Coldust area of Oldham, plans were submitted in June this year to seek permission to convert a 4-bed family home into a 6-bed HMO. So they met with Abdul Jabbar. Yeah. Here's Abdul Jabbar with some of his very friendly Asian bloc vote supporters. That actually is why this Jabbar went and met with him, because of who some of these people are. However, those at the meeting said that while Abdul Jabbar attended to listen to their concerns and the association said the councillor was supportive of the plight, they were advised there was little more they could do to challenge the application, as it was unlikely to make it to the planning committee. What that means is there's a loophole. There is a loophole for 6 beds or lower, such as this, on your residential street, a HMO, without any planning permission whatsoever. This is because the Town and Country Planning Order 1987 allows the use of a dwelling house or HMO to be used by up to 6 people with no planning permission required. Apparently, addressing the noise concerns, the council officer said the property would be no different to 6 members of one family living in the property. Now, normally when there's 6 people living in one property, in a house on a residential street, there's children, there's a mother and a father, it's a family unit. I think a family unit is very different to 6 strangers who, by the way, are only living there not because they're working in the area or anything like that, not even because they're students. It's, what does Councillor Markins call it? Poverty pimping, poverty farming. The garage door is going to be replaced with a window. That might, oh, thank you. So the garage, whoever's going to be in the garage will have a window. The council's highway engineer had no problems with 6 cars being parked outside. Since the use of a dwelling as a HMO does not require planning permission, Oldham Council approved the plans, having found the garage conversion will not cause any amenity, design or parking issues. So a house that came with a garage that is now no longer a garage with 6 adults being turned into a HMO causes no planning issues, parking issues. Councillor Taylor, that's Elaine Taylor, apparently says there is a need for well-run and well-maintained HMOs in Oldham. I'd say there are... Is she admitting to HMOs in Oldham being neither well-run nor well-maintained? Is that what she's saying there? I'm not sure. Councillor Elaine Taylor did admit that the council shares concerns with the community about the loss of properties, especially family homes and business premises. She said the council has to abide by planning regulations. She pointed out how planning permission is only required for conversions of homes that will contain 7 or more unrelated people. Okay. What these people have not told you, and I'll bring it up here, so you also see it here, is this Councillor Chris Goodwin on that very article I commented on the Oldham Times page about how we're going to stop this. And Chris Goodwin must have been on the source. Were you on the source, Chris? Got brave and decided to respond to me. How do you stop a permitted development that the law doesn't require planning permission to be granted? And by the way, he's the cabinet member for neighbourhoods. I'll tell you how you stop it. Elaine Taylor, Abdul Jabbar, Chris Goodwin, Arud Shah. I'll tell you how you stop it. You bring in something called an Article 4. Oh yeah, you can stop HMOs. The law allows you to stop HMOs at the discretion of the council, so your next door does not become a HMO, using something as simple as an Article 4 directive. And all that needs to happen for that is for the council to pass it. Which is what Mark Hince is trying to do. Let me bring this up.
Books taking over your home? Time to clear the clutter? Ziffit turns books into money fast. It's a free, easy...
Here we go.
SHAH Council Parish Council started a meeting of the Parish Council Tuesday, 29th of August 2023. Welcome. Go through the agenda. First item is apologies.
Yes, sir. Councillors Baker, Carrington and Riley.
Okay. Item 2, any planning permission for the keep it as some classification, like it says, a tourist house into 4 bedrooms. And like I said, it's great to it's not great that you've got that, but it's great that you're voicing the opinion about the matters, because they seem to be popping up everywhere, which is the reason why.
Now, why as residents of SHAH do we have to put up with
I don't believe we do.
like this?
Because, well, as we go through to the next point of the meeting, like, you'll see what our views are maybe on it, to the fact of what's happening, and it'll make it clear as why they're allowed to happen and what we think can be done as to not.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes 2 o'clock in the morning they've been fighting, drunk in the house, you know. We've heard people falling down the stairs. The police have been in past years. At the moment, maybe, I think there's 2 people in it, but we're not quite as bad as what we've had in the past. I mean, we've had a guy that was running around with a hammer in his hand, chasing somebody else because he'd been staying there and he wouldn't give him his belongings. He damaged my car.
Yeah, yes.
This lady here, one of the visitors, climbed over the garden wall at the back recently and knocked part of the wall down. They've had to have it repaired, but they can't get any money off these people.
Repaired at their own cost.
Yeah. I mean,
So it's help.
but we're not getting any help from anybody. And like I said, this has been going on 4.5 years now. I mean, would you like that next door to you? I mean, this is a house, this is a nice street. There's children across the road, 3 there, 4 next to it, young children. And they're seeing all these people wandering up and down the street with cans of beer and drugs being dropped off. I mean, what a life is it for them?
No, it's not correct. No, I don't think it's
So who do we go to get this result? I mean, this company that's looking after us at the moment are better than the one previous. They do come twice a week to have a look.
To monitor it.
It's called Bridget Housing. It's 5 Horsehead Street in Oldham.
Could you leave your details with us after this meeting?
Yeah.
Because obviously, this is an epidemic we're talking about.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
And
But if I don't speak up for myself and some of the neighbours, then who is going to do?
absolutely.
You've got the right to come and speak up, in my view. Yeah. It's,
So just to explain to you where we are, before we go into detail, your feelings are not alone, and you should not be made to feel alone having them feelings. Does that make sense?
Oh, yeah.
So there are things we can do. We won't accept lightly the eradication of our social fabric within this town, I would say. So I'll go into detail what we plan to do about it, or what we can do. And I think, in many respects, those who shout loudest get heard. And that is certainly something we make sure residents of SHAH and Compton have a voice.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of the residents on the street are sick to death of it. You know, it's been going on for a long time now. I mean, I'm frightened to open in my front door after 8 o'clock at night because I don't know who's
going to be there. See, unfortunately, at the moment, all you can do is complain to the correct authorities, like you've been doing to the people who are running it, who are managing it.
Yeah.
The police, obviously, reporting crimes, but you can just stand fire and maybe able to shed a bit more light.
Sorry, what's your first name?
Is there anybody else who's got any?
So let this play on. I want you to listen to it because I want you to listen to what Councillor Markins has forced through the SHAH Parish Council. Now, him and his team have only just took control of the council, and this is what they are doing.
Well, that's my understanding, yeah.
I just think it's so wrong next door to a nursery. My grandkids used to go to that nursery, but
It's part of that.
don't want to disrespect hopeless because you get people in every areas, every walk of life. But I wouldn't want one of them next door to my
Just
I mean, I know people have to have a roof over their head. You know, I don't dispute that. But when they put these people in these places, they should have some kind of rules by which they live by.
The real concern for me is, personally speaking, and I know that's shared by the people who I sit with, is we have a social responsibility, I believe, to people in need. Okay? And I think the first people who are being let down are actually the people in these poverty farms, as I call them.
Yeah.
And I think they're the first people getting exploited, and like I said, I'll go into more detail on my experiences with these places and why I think, for the benefit of all, we should come together and try to take whatever steps we can.
So, sorry, if Lee can't answer that because it was before your time, can Howard Sykes answer that about the Bengal brasserie? Is it going to be an HMO?
I couldn't, without going to check in and say whether I would all when you walk out here and say, yes, it's going to be an HMO. I certainly know it was residential and flats, but probably the client might be the best person who could tell us what it got granted for, because I wouldn't want to give you the wrong information.
Yeah, I'd have to check the minutes. Appreciate that. We'd have to check it.
In any event, the building seems to have stopped, doesn't it?
Thanks for your time. Yeah, so, okay.
Sorry, Chair, I'm going to ask you to get the public's details so I can contact you after the meeting.
Yeah, I think your details, yeah. Okay, so, is that it from public, the members of the public? Thank you. So move on to item 5. It's a motion to council from Councillor Markins to consider a motion in relation to Article 4, Appendix 1, direction on small HMOs, and the motion is attached overlay. So would you like to speak on this?
Yeah, I'm hoping everyone present's had a chance to look at the motion. I've tried to keep it as simplistic as possible, so please forgive me if it's too simple. My experience with HMOs is not a pleasant one, and HMOs aren't a new phenomenon. About 30 years ago, I had a friend who moved into an HMO because of family complications, and that triggered a spiral downward path which resulted in 20 years of slow death through drug abuse, etc, etc. And the problem is, in such places, people have a lot of complex problems and needs, and if they're not managed correctly, these problems become shared with the occupiers, and moreover, they spread out into the wider community. Okay. Now, in terms of HMOs, larger HMOs, they have to go through all forms of planning permission as it currently stands, which gives some recourse in terms of balances and checks, and takes into consideration residents' opinions and views. Okay. Now, I want to be absolutely clear on record on this. There will always be a need for places where people are cared for, in some cases rehabilitated and housed because they're desperate, irrespective of their nationality, sex or origin. And that is the focus, that should be there. But my view is, because of a lack of investment, because of the usual plutocrat vultures who get involved, these are becoming specifically now money-making ventures. And the biggest problem I see is we're all at risk, because HMOs that are 6 bedrooms or less do not have to go through planning permission. It could, your next door neighbour, whatever, it could happen, okay? And obviously this is putting stress on the housing market, particularly for young buyers. It's allowing, in my view, at the very least, an abdication of responsibility from the proper authorities, if you will. So that's why I believe that they're heavily supported by Oldham Council, because it takes responsibility of that in some degree. But more frightening is there are a number of councillors at Oldham OMBC who have vested interests in HMOs, and that's a fact. I'll be perfectly clear. I'm not referring to anybody in front of me. Now, I think the parish council, or my view is, it has a function within our society, but it also should allow us to have a voice. And at every opportunity we get to voice our community's opinion, which seems unanimous on this matter, I must state, I think we should utilise that. So I'll put a motion to the parish council, which effectively is asking Oldham Council to grant the parish of SHAH and Crompton a certain status which would require planning permission, to go through any course of planning permission. And that would also mean, round the planning meeting, which you might have seen previously, such applications would have to be discussed. It's a small step, but it's a step nevertheless. And if we get cross support on this particular motion, I'll be asking Councillor Sykes to second the motion to take this to full council meeting in November. Disproportionately, we've suffered with this, I think, and I just think morally, if you will, I think it's the right thing to do.
So, are we happy to read the motion out and second?
Sorry.
Yeah, sorry.
I don't think we need to read it out. We've all got a copy, and I'm sure the public have as well. Seems I've been specifically asked. I'm quite happy to second this. I suggested something very similar back in August 21 in terms of the Oldham Council Local Development Plan. And I suggested something that I voted for a motion, not tabled by my party, in November 22. Which was defeated by some other councillors in Oldham. So I'm quite happy to support this. So I don't have a problem with that. And I am well aware of how much very badly run ones of these, of which we have more than our fair share, blight the community. I'm also aware there are some that are well run, that provide, as Councillor Hinz has said, adequate housing.
Okay, what you need to understand, what has just happened there. That's the SHAH Parish Council emergency meeting Mark Hinz called. On one side, it's a very divided meeting. So even though they have a majority, they had not all of Mark Hinz's team turned up, I think, summer holidays. And remember, Councillor Mark Hinz's mother has also died. I think her funeral was yesterday or the day before. So despite all of these pressures, Mark went to a meeting knowing this was an issue. And he wanted to demonstrate that the SHAH Parish Council can flex its muscles and can be effective, more than just turning on Christmas lights and doing ceremonial stuff. It can actually make a positive difference to the community of SHAH and Crompton. And what Mark and his team put together was this Article 4 motion. And this Article 4 motion will basically draw a boundary around SHAH and Crompton Parish and say, we will no longer accept HMOs without planning permission. Even the small ones, a loophole. And the Article 4 provision, which Gary, you said, Councillor Steve Bashforth says only applies to students. Well, Councillor Steve Bashforth isn't the brightest of councillors, is he? Let's be honest, because he's misinformed. He's misinformed on this. What you can do with Article 4 is, or you don't even have to ask permission. The council just implement it. Fill in the right forms and write to the Secretary of State. And what Mark Hinds has done in that meeting was he's got Howard Sykes, the one-time leader of Oldham Council, the leader of the Liberal Democrats, to second his motion. That would go to Oldham Council. Now, this motion would have gone to Oldham Council this week. The problem was, with Mark's mother dying and the bank holiday, Elizabeth Drogan had sent out an email changing the deadline for motions. And Mark got the motion in half an hour late. On the Thursday, half an hour late. Now, Elizabeth Drogan had no powers to change the deadline the way she did. And no chief executive I know would have behaved like this towards a councillor who'd recently lost his mother. Half an hour late motion, they'd have allowed it. But Elizabeth Drogan is on a power trip. And she has been on a power trip for the last 4 or 5 years. She despises us. She was the one responsible for having many of you banned. And if HMO is now open in SHAH between now and November, you know where to go to, don't you? So Mark Hinds, seconded by Councillor Howard Sykes, will take a motion to November's full council meeting, wanting an Article 4 directive implemented across the entire parish of SHAH and Crompton. And they'll have to vote on it. So all of those Labour councillors who are pretending that they're objecting against HMOs will have an opportunity to vote. So if you don't want a HMO next door, these councillors will vote and support SHAH and Crompton. And maybe at a later date, or even at the same date in November, because I know people like Denise Leach has contacted Saddleworth Parish Council to see if they'd do something similar. There's no reason why Sam Al-Hamdani, Kenyon, the Lib Dems control Saddleworth Parish Council. There's no reason why a simultaneous motion cannot be brought forward for Saddleworth, the parish of Saddleworth, which goes all the way up to Saddleworth, Western Lees. And we will see which councillors support HMOs. Now, this was done like that. I'll be honest with you, it was as simple as that. Councillor Hinds asked me. I went away, did the research, went back to him and said, Mark, it's straightforward. Dozens of other councillors, neighbouring councillors to Oldham have done it. It's straightforward. And even though this makes them go to planning permission, what it does, it sets a narrative. It creates an atmosphere of anti-HMOs. So developers, knowing that we don't want them anymore, go somewhere else. And they'll go to another local authority. But great. And you know what? I'm not Howard Sykes' fan, am I? He likes to criticise me and likes to shit stir, likes to send stuff to Neil Wilby. But on this, Howard Sykes had no choice. How can he not support Councillor Markins? And this is politics. This is sophisticated politics implemented by Councillor Markins in his first month. Remember last month at the full council meeting? He went and took a motion with an amendment wanting a Muslim cemetery, the Muslim cemetery motion, as in, no, we don't want a Muslim-only cemetery sold, with land given away to a private company. We want a Muslim section in every one of the council cemeteries. It was, again, very sophisticated politics by a councillor. And the Labour Party voted against it. And watch how we use that come next May. Now, the problem Mark had with that motion, remember it was Brian Hoban who seconded it, was Councillor Hurley ran away and removed her name from that motion. And if Brian Hoban hadn't supported Mark Ince with that, Mark would have been made to look like a complete fool in that first council meeting. Now, you can ask Councillor Hurley why she refused to support Mark Ince on a motion that said actually Muslims should be able to be buried in any of the council cemeteries. They shouldn't have their own separate segregated one with land given to them by the council and be treated preferentially. They should be treated the same as everyone else. You'll have to ask Councillor Maggie Hurley why she not just wouldn't support Councillor Mark Ince, but went about it in such a sneaky way where Councillor Mark Ince would have been made to look a fool if Brian Hoban hadn't supported him. Go back and look at that council meeting. You'll see that interaction where Brian Hoban stood up and said, I'm not sure why I'm asked to second this, but I will. Not doing very well, are they, the Royton independents, I'm afraid. Not doing very well at all. So Chris Goodwin, going back to Chris Goodwin. Chris, this is how you stop permitted development that the law doesn't require planning permission to be granted for cabinet member for neighbourhood. You implement what's known as Article 4. Just like that. Now, Mark Ince also made reference to councillors making money from this. So maybe that's why councillors would want to vote against stopping HMOs expanding across the town, because they financially benefit from it. Here is the redacted declaration of members' interests of a certain councillor. And what's happened with this is that we've moved the redactions. The council, that's Paul Entwistle, the borough solicitor, and Elizabeth Drogan, the Director of Constitutional Services, because they're the ones who redact information. The council doesn't redact information. They decided to redact all of the HMOs that this councillor owns or is involved in. Springbank, King Street, King Street, King Street, King Street, Fairbottom Street, Ross Street, Yorkshire Street, Broadway, Meldrum Street, Villa Road, Hadfield Street, Alton Street, Methodist Church, Honeywell Lane, 18 Werneth Crescent, 48 Werneth Crescent, 9 Link Lane, Director of KKI Investments, KKI blah blah blah. You can see all the black stuff we've removed. Go on the council website and you'll see the council are involved in hiding the HMO business interests of their councillors, and this is not information that should be redacted. Let's be very, very clear here. Business interests like this is not information that should be redacted and hidden from the public. This is information in the public interest on the councillor's declaration of interest, and it should not have been hidden. So why was it hidden? And who else is involved? Surely a public question should be a declaration of it, a HMO declaration. I genuinely believe every councillor should be DBS checked, and likewise every councillor's declaration of interest should be a matter of public record, not redactions. How can you redact the business interests of a councillor? How can you redact information that is publicly available on Companies House from a councillor's declaration of interests? It stinks, doesn't it? They want this. And it doesn't matter. Because when we get to November, we'll find out. Because we'll force them. We'll force them to vote. And yes, Lynn, I'm sure there'll be a recorded vote. But it doesn't matter if there isn't, because we will force them to vote. And we will watch. And then we'll use the information to campaign in May. If Councillor Ross Birch, who's up, does not vote in support of restricting HMOs after she spoke out against them, if Councillor Peter Dean doesn't after he's spoken out against them, if these councillors don't vote in support of the Article 4 motion for Shaw Parish and Crompton Parish, and if they want, they can introduce their own motion, can't they? To cover their own ward. But if they vote against it, then it shows them for not just the hypocrites they are, it shows them for something else, I think. And we will use that information. I hear that they watch this. Some of them have even paid 99 pence and they watch this. We'll use your voting records in May's election. Councillor Elaine Taylor in Chadderton Central is up, and I know the people of Chadderton Central despise HMOs. And they don't want a HMO next door. Oh yeah. Yes. This is politics. This is how you go about holding them to account. And this is why they have been desperate to close me down and shut me up for the last 4 or 5 years. Because I'm not a Helen Bishop who just talks about issues. I will hold them responsible, and I will leverage whatever resources I am able to make our councillors accountable to those members of the public who elected them in the first place. Is that not democracy? Moving on, how are we doing for time? 10:30, okay. Plans for new £24.5 million theatre in Oldham approved despite campaign to save the Coliseum. Remember this was March earlier in this year, yeah? You've now seen the updated plans that they are getting rid of the middle bit in between the local interest centre and the old museum. I ain't got any issue with that. It's not a theatre, it's a performance space. But you know what? Jane Barker's found out, and I'm not really interested, so I'm not that I've got anything against Jane. But here we go. The Coliseum Theatre, Oldham Council said the Coliseum Theatre was beyond repair. What was it? Shahid Mushtaq, and I'm quoting him here. I'm trying my best to quote him. Riddled with asbestos. Is that not what he said? Well, the independent building survey, which Jane has got hold of, says it's not. It needed about £500,000 spending over 3 years. So to keep the existing Coliseum Theatre, which was fit for purpose in terms of size and the historical value, they're spending £25 million on a performance space, according to Jane's words, pushing a substandard new theatre the size of a shoebox. And look what it shows from the diagram, from the map she's pulled out. They want the old site for housing. They want the old site for housing. So this was never about saving the Coliseum. This was never about building a performance space fit for the, fit for purpose. It was a land grab. And Arud Shah wrote a very lengthy letter to Jane where she rants and raves because she's been caught out. Her and the council have been caught out. Well, I'm sorry, Jane, and I'm sorry, everyone else. This is what happens when you think you can negotiate with these people, because you cannot negotiate with these people. These people are not for negotiating with. What you've got to do is hold these people accountable at the ballot box, and you've got to campaign the way we have campaigned. And yes, it's ugly. 100% it's ugly. But it's effective. What we have done, standing up to them, despite the harassment and abuse, is we have held them to account in a way they've never been held to account. And I'm really, really sorry to those of you contacting me about the Colosseum. I just don't care enough. I don't care enough because where are you when my town's children have been groomed and gang raped? You don't come and stand alongside me and the people of my town because you're scared of being called racist. There is, I'm hearing a rally of some sort on the 15th or the 16th. It's a Saturday, I think, isn't it? Of September. In Oldham, to do with the child sex exploitation. There's a recent rally in Rochdale. I went and spoke at it. I was asked by Billy from Page UK, Parents Against Grooming UK, to speak. I found it really interesting. I'm not really a rally fan. And I said to the people when I did speak, I did go and speak. It was well attended. And what I did say was speaking on its own doesn't make any difference. What you've got to do is vote them out. You've got to put forward your own candidates and vote them out. And that's the only way you get the change you want. It's through the democratic process and hitting them where it hurts, which is removing them from power. People underestimate the power of a vote. It's the most powerful tool we have. Okay, Lynn. So 16th of September at 1 p.m. outside Annie Kenny statue. How many councillors have benefited from our campaign? How many people are now in positions of power as a consequence of me being locked up and fighting on this issue? So how many councillors are going to go and speak at that event? Will Councillor Hurley finally find her voice and go and speak at that event? Will Councillor Brian Hoban, who rose in popularity as did the Fails of Independence as a consequence of this issue? And I'm not being disingenuous in any way. But will they go and speak? Will they stand underneath the Annie Kenny statue and speak out against what has taken place? Will they speak out against Andy Burnham's assurance review that provided neither assurance nor reviewed sufficiently? And will they say only a public inquiry will put this matter to bed? Will they stand alongside survivors and say the politicians such as James Ignatius or Rook McMahon and others, Gerard Jones, should all be prosecuted? Will they? I'm asking you a question. They should. Shouldn't they? You'll have to excuse me, I'm still full of I ended up with a cold before I went away. I was okay whilst I went away, and I came back and seems my cold was waiting for me, so excuse my blowing of my nose or sniffling. I had a very interesting is the wrong word. I had a conversation I reflected on in Rochdale. Because I went there and I spoke for Billy. I like Billy. He's been nothing but respectful to me. And I think the Rochdale guys have been on a journey. Billy stood up and spoke very eloquently. And the reason behind it was because Billy was one of the young men who was abused himself. And he shared his story. In Rochdale. He pointed towards the town hall. But before I spoke, and I sat there and there was a good contingent from Oldham, and I looked around and I was very aware, because I speak, when I'm speaking to you, I'm just me here in my living room, in the corner of my living room, of the absence of diversity of that event, the absence of brown faces, black faces. No, not the absence, but it's not. And then I heard that there was a group of young men from Pakistani origin who was waiting round the corner, very angry, and the police vans were there. And I had a conversation with this white gentleman who doesn't know me. And he demanded to know what I was doing there. And I tried to be reasonable with him. And it was clear to me that he didn't want me there. And the reason he didn't want me there was because me being there challenged his racist viewpoint, which was people like me were responsible. And you could generalize it. And by me being there, it disrupted the racist narrative he wanted to push. And I reflected on that and I thought, great, all the more reason for me to be here. All the more reason for me to be here. Is that by me being here, and I think I was well received, by me being here, people can see what is really going on, what this is really about, and we move it away from the oversimplistic racist arguments that suits those who've benefited from this arrangement. Which is why it is my belief that if there is a rally in Oldham, that our councillors from our opposition parties have to be there. Because only by them being there and standing and speaking do they protect all of you and everyone else in this town who's spoken out about this issue and who cares passionately about this issue. We're not the far right, we're not the racists, we're not the conspiracy theorists, we're not whatever Basia Cummings claimed we were. Or Joshua Herman. Or Sean Fielding, or Jim McMahon, or Debbie Abrahams, or Arooj Shah, or Shah, or Stephen Bashforth, Howard Sykes, Sam Al-Hamdani, Kenyon. Every opposition councillor from an independent sort of background who's in a position in Oldham, including the Conservative candidates, are there in part because of what we've done on this issue. And this isn't about me at all. This is about the people of this town. It's about the people of Oldham, people of Royton, people of St James, Chadderton, Failsworth, Shaw, Crompton. Every opposition councillor should be stood in solidarity on the 16th at 1 o'clock outside the Annie Kenny statue, ready to speak. Am I reading the room wrong? Is it an unfair ask? Am I being unreasonable? Fireworks. Effort to tackle fireworks. Sorry, I'm just trying to get this to work. I've still not bought... I've swapped a wire, but I think it's my computer or something else. So... Here we go. Efforts to tackle nuisance fireworks in Oldham ramped up. So, yeah, massive issue. I was at my brother's house today. He was telling me about it. He lives in Coppice. And not just the fireworks, but the revving of expensive sports cars. Because it keeps him, his wife, everyone up all night. And it's regular. It's almost daily, nightly. In recent weeks, residents across the borough have complained of fireworks going off after dark. Now, Greater Manchester Police have said they are stepping up efforts, along with Oldham Council. So this is what they're going to do. They're going to do enhanced licensing checks at shops. They're not selling them illegally, are they? They're not selling them to children, are they? Visiting venues known to use fireworks. Reminding them of the rules. So who are the venues? What are the venues? See what's going on here? Mapping out known hotspots to ensure that they are regularly monitored by officers or the appropriate authorities. So what are these hotspots? Where are they? Establishing a single point of contact for fireworks complaints in order to build a clearer intelligence picture. Engaging with local schools as if it's the kids setting off the fireworks to remind young people of the risks that come with firework usage. This is the biggest load of nonsense from Chief Superintendent Philip Hutchinson that I've read in a long, long time. Together with our partners, we are determined to act on nuisance fireworks. Councillor Chris Goodwin, Cabinet Member for Neighbourhoods, we are aware of the issue of fireworks are having on our local communities, and we appreciate and understand the frustrations and disruption this is causing. Together, we are committed to tackling this situation. Work is already underway to address this antisocial behaviour, with joint efforts being made by all partners, including GMP and Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Services. You can report it by calling GMP on 101. Listen. The fireworks. By the way, I remember, was it Councillor Akil Salamat set off some fireworks to celebrate his election victory with the headline "Untouchable" underneath, whilst he's setting off fireworks in a residential area. So I'm afraid, Councillor Goodwin, perhaps you need to start with your own councillors first. Look. Is it an elephant in the room? Let's address the poppadom in the room. It's weddings. It's Asian weddings. And I think the word Asian's wrong, because it's not the Indians that do it. It's weddings in the Pakistani community and it's weddings in the Bangladeshi community. Let's talk about what is causing the issue. It's the weddings. We know where the venues are. We know who's doing it. We even know why they're doing it. It's the weddings. So why won't you just own up to it? Why won't you just own up to it instead of this nonsense? They won't do anything. GMP said it was an accident when they hit my neighbour in the face last week. Of course, GMP are, they are what they are, aren't they? You wonder why, don't you? You wonder why. So this is Jennifer Williams. Those of you who followed me know I can't stand a woman. She now writes for the Financial Times. Jennifer Williams has been promoting Newman Head, that's Martin. Is it Potts? Mr. Potts, Glyn Potts. And how, the education system, it's a cost of living crisis. And she got to see at Newman School where she followed it for a year. Did she egg? Financial Times, by the way, you can't read without paying. So it's behind a paywall. So it shows what sort of lefties these are. Jennifer Williams and her mates are. Now, Glyn Potts is selling this narrative, and he's a Labour Party darling, isn't he? He's a Labour Party darling running a failing school. But he plays politics. This is Glyn Potts, who was the one who tweeted encouraging people to follow Neil Wilby. That's the same Neil Wilby who posted pictures focusing on young women's breasts. So the head teacher of a school tweeted encouraging people to follow a man who likes to post pictures of young women's breasts. I'll let you work that one out. But according to Glyn, it's this fake left narrative. Children are starving in schools. And they're hanging around the dinner tables waiting to feed off scraps as though it's off Oliver Twist. And it's unreasonable for schools, blah, 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 all of that nonsense. Well, Glyn, why don't you just take a pay cut and feed them? Why don't you and your senior leaders just feed them? You won't miss £100 a month or a few £100 a month from your salaries, but that's not what you're doing, is it? You're making political capital out of this, and you're creating this dependency culture on our children and taking away from parents the responsibility they have of feeding children. I grew up poor, very poor. And I appreciate and understand that there are also children who do not get free school meals, but are on that cusp of families who struggle. Well then, SHAH, why did he give £1 million in grant to Frank Rothwell for his grass? Why didn't he set up a special lunchtime initiative for children in every school in this town? There are choices. There are choices and you fail to take them, but this is about politics and using our children to promote the Labour Party. And that's what Jennifer Williams does and has been doing for a long time. What Jennifer Williams and Glyn Potts don't talk about or ignore is this. On 17th of May, Newman was inspected, and by the time the report came out, my understanding, my information is that Glyn and his mates went back to Ofsted crying, screaming, because they were going to be found to be inadequate. So instead, they've been found to require improvement. The quality of education requires improvement. Well, what's the quality of education, which is what the teachers provide, got to do with children being hungry? Behaviour and attitudes requires improvement. Personal development requires improvement. Leadership and management. Mr. Potts, your leadership and your management requires improvements. These people have been failing our children for decades. Which moves me on to this story. Eton Star Oldham accepted. So first of all, of course, it should be of public interest that on the board of directors of this Eton-style sixth form that's coming to Oldham is the chief executive, Dirty Harry Caffrell. He's somehow got himself involved in that. Eton Star Oldham will recruit dynamic young people who have had fewer opportunities and provide them with a rigorous and rounded education and support them to achieve places at the very best universities. So Eton are opening a branch in Oldham, or supporting some sort of branch in Oldham with Star Academies. Sir Hamid Patel, I'm sure he's got the word mufti in front of him, but it seems to be omitting here. With a growing demand for sixth form places in these areas, we aim to enable more young people to benefit from a high quality academic education. Listen, this has got nothing. Those of you who think this is a good idea for Oldham, it's not a good idea for Oldham. It will have an adverse detrimental effect on the sixth form college, which does very well, Oldham College, which does very well, and the sixth forms in the schools that still exist that do very, very well. Blue Coat, Crompton House, Hume, North Chad, I think, has a sixth form as well. No. This is a vanity scheme pursued by Harry Caffrell, Arud Shah, to promote themselves, and this is going to be devastating for the wider 16 to 19 offer in the town. Whilst Eton can play games and believe that somehow there's a special Eton way of educating. Listen, when you have kids from the best, from wealthy backgrounds, stable families, well-fed, all of the other things, even in the worst educational setting, they will thrive. Excuse me. So this is a joke. The joke's the wrong word. It's a disgrace. It's an utter disgrace. What should have happened is we should have strengthened our existing 16 to 19 offering across the board. Say £1 million a year goes into this from the council and its partners. You know, from you. It would have been better to sponsor 100 places at Hume for the most gifted students who can't afford it to sit an entrance exam and the council pay. It would have been better to expand and extend the provision offered at North Chadderton, at Crompton House, at Blue Coat, and widen that. It would have been better to go and speak with the sixth form, who deliver outstanding results, in my opinion, and say, okay, you've had to diversify your offer instead of concentrating on core academic subjects like you used to. How can we support you to focus on the core academic subjects or create a specific pathway and build what we've got? Instead, we're becoming a zoo, an experiment for Eton to come to Oldham. It's poor. It genuinely is poor. Which brings me to the last thing. 345 young people in Oldham attend youth sessions through Violence Reduction Unit's community-led programme. Kate Green, the Police and Crime Commissioner, Andy Burnham with Arud Shah visited the Ghazali Trust, and I think there's Councillor Shahid Mushtaq there. Alliance of organisations, 345 young people have taken part in positive activity through youth club and family workshops. Complete gobbledygook nonsense. This is just money. This is just money being handed out to organisations who have influence in their community. And Arud Shah is sat next to Andy Burnham. This is his equalities lead. And this is about violence reduction in Glodick. Shameless, because the man she hangs off the arm of, nothing to say, have you, Shah? Nothing to say. I think we should all go. I think we should all go to court in November and watch. What do you think? I think we should all go to court in November and watch. Arud Shah is Andy Burnham's equality lead. Andy Burnham won't say a single word because Andy Burnham is as reliant on the bloc Muslim vote as is Jim McMahon MP, Debbie Abrams MP. In fact, Andy Burnham's reliant on it from a wider demographic, which is why he's had nothing to say on Arooj Shah's failure to support Oldham Pride or any other Pride festival across Greater Manchester. And the reason why I'm bringing this up is Arooj Shah is his equalities lead. It's Greater Manchester Equality Combined Authority, Andy Burnham's equality lead. She leads on that portfolio. There would be outrage if a white councillor who led on that portfolio didn't attend Black History Month events or Eid celebrations or Diwali or something like that. You'd pick on it straight away, and you and I would use, probably rightly, the term racist. Well, why is Arooj Shah refusing to attend or failing to attend any of the Pride events across Greater Manchester? And worse for me, why is Andy Burnham still supporting her and kept her in her role? But hey, this is the town we live in, and as we're seeing, these issues expand way beyond the town we live in. Which is why when we win in Oldham, we'll create a template and make it very, very clear. Very, very clear. The Glodic Baths, they run their community facilities out of, I'm presuming this is actually in the former Glodic Baths. The meeting, Gary. And yes, it was sold during Purdah at a knockdown price. Greater Manchester Police do not believe it was unlawful, even though the selling of a public asset during Purdah isn't what you're meant to do. Because even if it wasn't a bribe, it's how it looks. It's how it looks. But we know, in a town like ours, they don't care how it looks because they are beyond reproach. There's a council meeting on Wednesday, I hear. My understanding is many of you failed to get questions in on time because they loaded the questions up very quickly. So yours were like 15, 16, 17. I don't think that was in any way accidental. If any of you are interested in getting questions in, I would contact Elizabeth Drogan or Paul Entwistle and ask them at what exact time the window for public questions open. Is it 9 a.m. the morning after the council meetings, or is it at 10 o'clock as soon as the council meetings have ended? And then if you want, we'll get some questions in. Likewise, there's the agenda of the council meeting, and there's a whole host of things on there that I probably would like to go through with you. It won't be today because we've just gone past 11 o'clock, but I'd like to go through with you some of those things. So I'm thinking possibly coming back on Tuesday night. I'm thinking coming back on Tuesday night and going through the full council meeting agenda, and I'll just do that as a live open transmission for everyone and not just members only. So maybe I'll get a coffee bought or two by the other people that join us. Thank you to the 100 of you who've joined me today. So I'm just looking at the screen. So there's 100 of you of the 102 or so who have signed up. So there's 100 people who've joined me throughout the course of this evening. I'm happy to be back. I've got some interesting news on all the court cases as well, but I'll save that for next Sunday, I think. And that's me done, I think, for this evening. So thank you for bearing with me for the 2 hours and on a Sunday evening, and give me a bit of time and we'll get back up to speed as usual. And of course, my offer remains, my ask of all the independents is that on the 16th, there is a rally wanting a public inquiry where members of the public will be attending, victims and survivors will be attending. It'll be beneath the Annie Kenney statue. And are these people going to be attending, and will you be there to speak and support them? Or are you just using them? A very good evening.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.
On the 20th of November 2003, James Ignatius O'Rourke McMahon was elected councillor for the Failsworth East Ward of Oldham. Deeply ambitious, he ruthlessly rose to power, and by 2011, he was already leader of the council. In 2015, exploiting a Labour Party loophole, he became MP for Oldham West and Royton. If only the people of the town knew then what they now know.
Do not fear them. Do not fear any of them.